I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from Jenna in years. A soft, sincere laugh, like the one she'd given when we first started dating, when we used to spend hours talking about everything and nothing. But now, as I listened from just outside the kitchen door, I felt my stomach churn with dread. That laugh was for someone else. Married life had been fine, or so I thought. After 14 years together, we'd settled into routines that worked for us. I didn't mind if our relationship had lost some spark, I was happy, content even. But lately, something felt off. Jenna's glances had grown colder, her remarks sharper. The woman I'd loved for so long felt like a stranger, her warmth replaced with a wall I couldn't break through. At first, I thought maybe it was just stress. Jenna's job had always been demanding, and lately, she'd been working more hours than usual, going on business trips at odd times. Still, I never questioned it. But the growing distance between us gnawed at me, and each night, as I watched her with her phone, texting someone with a smile I hadn't seen in ages, the doubts crept in. One evening, she came home late again, saying she'd been out with friends. She looked disheveled, her hair tousled in that way that told me she hadn't been at a quiet dinner. When I asked if she'd had a good time, she brushed me off, muttering something about just catching up before heading upstairs. As I watched her retreating figure, I felt a spark of anger, something I'd rarely experienced with her before. Was I losing her? The next day, I decided to come home early, something I hadn't done in years. I thought maybe we needed a surprise night in, just the two of us, like old times. I wanted to remind her of the life we'd built together. But as I walked into our home, I found her on the couch, a look of shock on her face as she quickly shoved her phone behind a pillow. The casual smile she flashed me was unconvincing. It was as if, for the first time, I could see right through her. "Hey, didn't expect you home so early," she said, her voice forced. "Thought I'd surprise you," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though my heart raced with suspicion. We shared a quick kiss, one that felt hollow, and she excused herself to finish some work. As she walked away, the guilt in her eyes lingered in my mind. I decided right then that I needed to know the truth. That night, I called my friend Carl. We'd known each other since college, and he'd recently taken up a job in private security. After some hemming and hawing, I finally confessed my suspicions. It was hard to say it out loud, hard to admit that maybe, just maybe, my wife was hiding something. Carl was calm, offering no judgment. He simply asked me what I wanted to do about it. I knew then that I couldn't ignore it anymore. He suggested a discreet tracker for her phone, a tool that would let me know where she went, at least until I had enough to confront her. I hesitated but ultimately agreed. Trust was already gone, and I needed answers, even if they hurt. It didn't take long for the truth to start unfolding. A week after setting up the tracker, Jenna told me she was heading out for dinner with some friends. I watched as the app pinged her location. I saw her move from our house, not toward the restaurant where her friends usually met, but to a high-end restaurant across town, a place I knew we could never afford to casually dine. I felt a pang in my chest, but I swallowed it, trying to stay calm. Then I watched as her location shifted from the restaurant to a hotel. She was still there an hour later. And then another. My heart was pounding, anger and betrayal boiling inside me. She was there with someone, no doubt about it. I closed the app and sat in our living room, staring blankly at the walls. The woman I'd built my life around was lying to me, betraying me with someone she'd probably known only a few months. I imagined her laugh, her whispers, the looks she'd give him that were once meant only for me. But the hurt didn't linger for long. In its place, a new resolve grew. I wasn't going to be just another fool, another man left heartbroken by someone he trusted. No, I was going to handle this my way. The next weekend, Jenna came home after another one of her supposed work nights. I'd spent the day preparing. I made her favorite dinner, set up candles around the dining room, and played the same soft jazz we danced to at our wedding. She looked surprised but pleased, thinking that maybe I was none the wiser. She sat down at the table, her smile warm but empty. "What's the occasion?" she asked, feigning innocence. "No occasion," I said with a smile. "Just thought it'd be nice to have a night in, just the two of us." We ate in silence, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavily between us. She laughed at a few of my jokes, but her eyes looked distant, as if she was only half here. I watched her closely, taking in every detail, noting every sign of guilt, every flicker of her wandering gaze. Finally, as we finished our meal, I pulled out a folder from under my chair. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. I slid it across the table to her, watching as she opened it. Inside were the screenshots of her tracked locations, the receipts from the restaurant and hotel, the evidence of her lies. She flipped through them, her face growing pale, her mouth falling open as the reality of her exposed secret set in. I leaned back, crossing my arms as I watched her. "Care to explain?" I asked, my tone calm but laced with fury. Her eyes darted up to meet mine, wide with panic. I can explain," she stammered, her hands trembling. "I'm all ears, Jenna. Take your time." Jenna's eyes darted around the room, her mouth moving as if to form words, but nothing came out. I could see the desperation in her gaze, a caged animal frantically searching for a way out. I stayed silent, letting her squirm under the weight of her lies. It was almost satisfying. Finally, she managed, "It's not what it looks like, Tom. Really, it's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Oh, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife's been lying to me, sneaking around, meeting another man at a hotel while telling me she's out with friends. But please, enlighten me." Jenna swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if she could blink away the mountain of evidence in front of her. Her hands fumbled with the papers, and she pushed them away, shaking her head. "I can explain, it's just, you wouldn't understand. Try me." My voice was steady, but inside, I felt the old hurt battling with anger, resurfacing with each attempt she made to cover her tracks. She hesitated, her shoulders slumping as if the fight had drained out of her. "Okay," she said softly, looking down at her hands. "It's just been a rough year, Tom. You're always busy with work, and I've felt alone. It's like I'm invisible to you." Her voice broke a little, and for a second, I thought I saw genuine pain in her eyes. But I couldn't let myself feel sorry for her. Not now. Not after everything. "So instead of talking to me, you went to a hotel with a stranger?" Her lips quivered, and she looked down. "It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. It just happened. He's someone I met through work, and we got close. I know it sounds horrible, but he was there for me when you weren't." I shook my head, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "So this is my fault. I wasn't there for you, so you had to run off with someone else." My voice was sharp, but I couldn't help it. She was trying to turn her betrayal into something I had done wrong. "Tom, you don't understand. I've tried to tell you so many times how I feel. I've tried to talk to you, but you're always so focused on your own stuff. You've shut me out." Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked down, clutching her hands together. "Don't you dare put this on me," I said, my voice cold. "You're the one who lied. You're the one who made these choices. Not me." She looked away, her jaw clenched, the tears spilling over. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I shouldn't have let it get this far. I never meant for it to turn into this." The words stung, but there was a hollow ring to them, as if she were saying what she thought I wanted to hear. A mistake. A few dinners out might be a mistake, but months of sneaking around? That was no accident. That was a choice, one she'd made over and over again. Jenna, I want the truth. I deserve that much. I leaned forward, my eyes hard, willing her to admit it all, to give me some piece of honesty I could work with. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, biting her lip. For months, she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper. 4 months. The number hit me like a slap. 4 months of sneaking around, of lying to my face every single day. 4 months of laughing with him the way she used to laugh with me. The anger simmered in my chest, threatening to boil over, but I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. What were you planning to do? I asked. Just keep lying to me? Or was there a plan to come clean at some point? She looked away, her fingers twisting nervously. I don't know. I thought, maybe it would fizzle out, that it would just end, and we could go back to normal. Normal? I laughed bitterly. You thought you could have an affair and then just go back to normal? She winced, her shoulders slumping. I know it sounds crazy, but yes. I didn't want to leave you. I never wanted to break up our family. I was lonely, Tom. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Lonely? So that's the excuse. You were lonely, so that makes it okay to cheat. She didn't respond, her eyes glued to the floor. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of everything we'd built crumbling, piece by piece, with every word that went unspoken. So, what happens now? She finally whispered, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I shook my head, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. I don't know, Jenna. I really don't know. I stood up, unable to look at her anymore. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, had shattered that trust in the worst possible way. And yet, a part of me still wanted to hold on to the life we'd built, to pretend that things could go back to the way they were. But I knew that was impossible. Once trust is broken, it can never truly be repaired. I left her sitting at the table, her head in her hands, and walked out of the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed air. I needed space to think, to process everything that had just happened. As I walked down the street, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I returned home later that night, Jenna was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the memories of our life together flashing through my mind. The laughter, the love, the promises we'd made, all of it felt like a lie now. How could she have done this to us? To me? In the morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes red and puffy. Tom, I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll do anything to make it right. I swear, I'll end it. I'll cut off all contact with him. Just, please don't leave me. Her words sounded hollow, like an apology rehearsed in front of a mirror. But there was something in her eyes, a desperation, a flicker of fear, that made me pause. She was genuinely afraid of losing me, of losing the life we'd built together. But could I ever trust her again? I took a deep breath, looking at her, searching her face for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But all I saw was a stranger, someone who'd lied to me, who'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I can't just pretend this never happened, I said quietly. You broke something, Jenna. And I don't know if it can ever be fixed. She nodded, her lips trembling. I know. But please, give me a chance to make it up to you. I'll do anything, Tom. Anything. I stared at her, the words I wanted to say stuck in my throat. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her that it was too late, that she'd destroyed everything. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, that still remembered the good times, wanted to believe her, to give her a chance to make things right. After a long silence, I nodded slowly. Fine. But you're going to have to prove it, Jenna. Every day. And it's not going to be easy. Relief flooded her face, and she reached out to take my hand. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Tom. I swear, I'll make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. But as I sat there, her hand in mine, I knew that things would never be the same. She could make all the promises in the world, but the trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. And deep down, I knew that I'd never be able to forget. I watched her carefully over the following weeks, looking for any sign of change, any glimpse of the woman I'd once loved. She was trying, that much was obvious. She left her phone out in the open, texting only when she was next to me. She got home earlier, started helping more with the small chores I usually took care of myself, and even suggested marriage counseling. To any outside observer, she'd look like a repentant wife, a woman desperate to rebuild what she'd destroyed. But to me, it all felt staged. Every small gesture, every effort felt calculated, as though she was following a script. But I couldn't voice that, couldn't let myself give in to the paranoia her actions had sparked in me. Still, the bitterness festered, a silent wound that wouldn't heal, no matter how many times she apologized or tried to make amends. I'd see her laugh at one of my jokes, and all I could think about was the other man, her laughter, her lies, and that hotel. Every night, I lay next to her in bed, and every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I'd look over at her sometimes, wondering what else she might be hiding, what other lies she had woven over the years that I hadn't caught on to. Part of me wanted to ask her, to demand she come clean about every little detail, but I knew that no matter what she said, I wouldn't believe it. How could I? Trust was the foundation of any relationship, and once it was gone, what was left? Then, one night, a little over a month after she had ended things with him, I made the mistake of giving her a second chance. We'd gone out to dinner, and she'd been especially attentive, holding my hand, looking at me like I was the only man in the world. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the faint flicker of hope that we could actually recover, but I felt something soften in me. That night, we shared a moment that, for a brief second, felt like old times. But when it was over, and I lay there in the quiet of the dark, all those painful memories came rushing back. The next morning, she seemed happy, humming softly to herself as she made breakfast. She gave me a smile when I entered the kitchen, her eyes bright in a way they hadn't been for a long time. "Morning," she said softly, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to me. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. But as I sipped my coffee, a nagging voice at the back of my mind whispered that something was off. And sure enough, when I went to the bathroom to wash up, I saw her phone buzzing on the sink counter, lighting up with a text. It was from him. I didn't know his name, but I knew that area code. She had told me she'd blocked him, that it was over. But the text on her screen proved otherwise. The sight of that single message sent a fresh wave of fury crashing over me. I picked up her phone, my hands shaking. The message was short, almost innocuous. "Last night was fun. Can't stop thinking about you." I read it twice, each word carving another wound into me. Fun. She had lied to my face, again. Every apology, every promise, it had all been a facade. The anger that had been simmering inside me for months erupted, white-hot and undeniable. When she returned to the bedroom, I was waiting for her, her phone clutched tightly in my hand. "Care to explain this?" I demanded, holding up the phone. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence heavy with all the things left unsaid. "I thought you were done with him," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. I am," she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "Tom, I swear, I haven't seen him since I told you I'd ended it." "Then why is he texting you about last night?" I hissed, stepping closer. She looked down, her hands trembling. I don't know why he'd say that. I told him it was over. Maybe he's just trying to make trouble between us. Oh, so now he's the villain. I laughed bitterly. Jenna, I've had enough. You've lied to me from the start, and I can't keep doing this. I'm done. She looked up at me, her face a mixture of fear and desperation. Please, Tom, don't say that. I made a mistake, okay? I know that. But I love you. I never stopped loving you. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't say that word. Love? You don't know the first thing about it. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have snuck around, hiding behind fake apologies and empty promises. You would have ended it. But you didn't. Tears filled her eyes, and she reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. The sight of her standing there, tears streaming down her face, should have broken my heart. It should have made me want to hold her, to comfort her. But all I felt was contempt. I'll give you what you want, she whispered, her voice trembling. If you want me to go, I'll go. I stared at her, and for a moment, I considered it. But then, something inside me shifted. Letting her go, letting her walk away, felt too easy. After all she'd put me through, she didn't deserve to just walk away without consequences. No, I said, my voice calm, cold. You're staying. And I'm going to make sure you understand exactly what it feels like to be betrayed, to have everything you've ever known ripped away. Her eyes widened, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? You'll see, I replied, turning away from her. You wanted to keep lying to me, so fine. Let's keep up appearances. But don't think for a second that you're forgiven. You're going to feel every ounce of the pain you've caused me. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, staring after me. As I made my way down the stairs, a plan started forming in my mind, a way to make her pay for every betrayal, every lie. I was done being the fool, the doting husband who forgave and forgot. I was going to show her just how dangerous it was to break a man's trust. Over the next few days, I set my plan into motion. I started by withdrawing all the money from our joint savings account, moving it into a private account she had no access to. Next, I changed all the passwords to our streaming services, the online grocery account, and the home security system. Each little inconvenience would be a reminder of the walls closing in, of how her choices were affecting her life. I kept the facade of the dutiful husband in public. Friends who saw us out at dinner still thought we were happy, still saw the smiles I forced myself to wear. And when Jenna tried to talk to me, tried to make amends, I brushed her off, cool and dismissive. I knew it was petty, but I wanted her to feel the isolation, the powerlessness I'd felt all those months, knowing that she'd shattered something in me that could never be fixed. It didn't take long for her to start unraveling. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, she broke down, sobbing into her hands. Tom, please, she whispered, her voice thick with desperation. Please, can we talk about this? I can't take this anymore. I watched her for a moment, taking in the sight of her crumbling. Can't take what? I asked coolly. The guilt? Or the consequences of your actions? Both, she choked out. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I'll do anything, Tom. Just tell me what I can do to make this right. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Funny, isn't it? How the tables have turned. All those nights you spent lying to me, sneaking around, thinking I'd never find out. And now here you are, begging for forgiveness you don't deserve. Her face twisted in agony, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I know I don't deserve it, she whispered. But please, give me a chance to prove I'm better than this. That I can be the wife you deserve. I laughed softly, the sound bitter and cold. You've had all the chances in the world, Jenna. And you blew every one of them. She sat there, silent and broken, her face streaked with tears. And for the first time, I felt something close to satisfaction. She'd wanted to play games, to lie, to cheat. Now, she'd finally met her match. And as I looked at her, I realized that I was no longer the man she'd once loved. I was something different, something forged from the ashes of her betrayal. And I was done letting her hurt me. The months that followed were a dark kind of triumph. Jenna had become a shell of herself, walking around the house on eggshells, trying to read my every expression, as if hoping for some sign of forgiveness that would never come. She tried everything: apologies, gifts, dinners, even couples therapy. She threw herself into trying to win me back, bending over backward to please me. But I kept my distance, cold and calculated. I wanted her to feel the emptiness, the constant doubt and fear I'd lived with for too long. But as time passed, something unexpected started gnawing at me. At first, I brushed it off as the remnants of betrayal, lingering bitterness. But then it became clear: the anger, the need for revenge, it was starting to feel hollow. A dark emptiness settled inside, an ache that no amount of her apologies or my retaliation could soothe. Every time she tried to make things better, I felt the satisfaction slipping away, replaced by something far more haunting. One night, months into our twisted dance, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Jenna was asleep beside me, her breathing shallow and restless. I watched her, this stranger I'd once loved. In my mind, I replayed the last few months, our cold war of bitterness, her shattered apologies, my ruthless retaliation. All of it led me here, to this hollow shell of a marriage that looked intact from the outside but was rotting from within. I got up quietly and went to the study. Sitting there in the dark, I felt the truth settle over me like a shroud: this revenge had become as toxic as her betrayal. Somewhere along the way, I had lost the man I was, the man who'd loved and trusted openly. I could keep Jenna trapped in this endless cycle of guilt and regret, but the man I had become was no longer someone I recognized. I needed to find a way out, not just for her, but for myself. The next morning, Jenna looked at me over breakfast, her face lined with exhaustion and hope. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I can't change what happened. But I'll do anything to make things right. Just tell me what to do." I put down my coffee and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. "Jenna, we can't keep living like this. I can't keep punishing you, and you can't keep pretending that this is what we used to have. It's gone. We're gone." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw a flash of something that looked like relief mixed with sadness. Are you saying it's over?" I nodded, feeling an odd sense of peace wash over me. "Yes, it's over. We've both become something we don't recognize. I don't want to live with this resentment anymore, and I don't want you to keep begging for a forgiveness that I can't give." She nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. I could see the tears pooling in her eyes, but for once, there was no begging, no pleading. Maybe she'd been waiting for this too, hoping that I would be the one to finally end it. We separated quietly, and a few months later, the divorce was finalized. Jenna moved out, and I stayed in the house. The silence in the empty rooms was different now, not the same tense silence that had filled them before. This was a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I started rebuilding my life, slowly, one step at a time, rediscovering the things I'd lost along the way. Then, one crisp autumn morning, I got an unexpected email. The subject line simply read, "The truth you should know." It was from a name I didn't recognize, but the message inside sent chills down my spine. "Tom, I don't know if you remember me, but I thought you deserved to know something. My name is Amanda, and I was involved with Jenna's affair partner for a few years. I left him after realizing how toxic he was, and I wanted you to know something that may or may not give you closure." I kept reading, my heart pounding with each word. Jenna's affair, it started out as more than an affair. He manipulated her, pressured her into the relationship, and threatened her career if she didn't comply. He's done this to other women too, and I was one of them. When Jenna tried to end things, he wouldn't let her go easily. He used her vulnerability, her fear of losing her job, to keep her close. She tried to break it off many times but was afraid of what he'd do. I left him a few years ago after realizing the extent of his manipulation. I don't know if this changes anything, but I thought you should know. I put down the phone, my hands shaking. The room spun around me, and I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. I had spent months punishing her, months tearing her down, convinced that she betrayed me out of selfishness or boredom. But this changed everything. She hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been trapped, manipulated. And while it didn't justify her lying, it cast a whole new light on everything. My mind reeled as I tried to piece together what this meant, not just for our past but for the man I'd become in the wake of her betrayal. I had been so consumed by my need for revenge that I hadn't even considered the possibility of a more complicated truth. I'd allowed my anger to blind me, to turn me into someone I never wanted to be. The next few days were a blur. I tried to reach out to Jenna, to explain what I'd learned, but she didn't respond. She had moved on, and I couldn't blame her. I had made sure she knew I wanted nothing more to do with her, and now I had to live with that decision. The pain, the guilt, settled over me like a weight, and for the first time, I realized that I might never find a way to make things right. As time passed, I tried to come to terms with everything that had happened. I focused on rebuilding my life, learning from my mistakes, and healing from the bitterness that had consumed me. I knew that I'd never get the closure I craved, but I also knew that I could choose to live differently, to let go of the anger that had defined me for too long. Years later, I heard through a mutual friend that Jenna had moved out of state, started fresh. She was happy, at peace in a way that she hadn't been when we were together. And somehow, knowing that she was free from the past, from the cycle we'd been trapped in, gave me the closure I needed. I never got to tell her I understood, never got to make things right. But as I sat alone in the quiet of my home, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was my second chance, a chance to become a better man, one who could forgive, let go, and finally move forward.